If you're suffering from thought blocking and tired of losing your train of thought, you might have experienced and gotten fed up with the following symptoms: going off on tangents, suddenly being unable to speak, and then finally being embarrassed because you really can't find your way back to what you were talking about. Now, the causes of thought blocking can range from schizophrenia to simply having too much on your mind. Or maybe you're tired, dehydrated, or maybe you just need to eat something because your blood sugar levels aren't quite right. It could be a problem that requires you to seek medical attention, or it could be something you can fix very, very quickly. And for some ideas on how to fix it using your mind in particular ways, ranging from brain exercises to neurobics to just plain old common sense, let's dive in to some powerful techniques that can help remove thought blocking potentially forever. So thought blocking, what's the definition? Well, it's one of those terms that is used in different ways by different people. In psychology, it's often used in discussions of schizophrenia. For example, there's a study where drug options were suggested to help a mentally ill individual who continually lost his or her train of thought. But in common parlance, some people think of the blocking thought process as an everyday occurrence, and it certainly happens even to me as a trained memory expert, and it's completely normal. Some forms of thought blocking may relate to something called the ugly sister effect. Now, the ugly sister effect happens when you're trying to think of something like, say, a movie title, but instead of the correct answer coming up, your memory serves you multiple other possible options. So you're trying to think of Top Gun, but instead you're thinking of Flight of the Navigator. And no, that doesn't quite sound right, but yet any title except for Top Gun keeps coming to mind. And this is named the ugly sister effect because these competing thoughts are like the ugly sisters who block Prince Charming from enjoying Cinderella's charms. Now that we know the different ways the term thought blocking can be used, let's talk about how to stop experiencing it, or at least deal with it positively when it happens. So the first thing I would suggest is, if you're concerned in any way about a health issue, nothing I'm saying here is health advice. Please go and see a doctor or your favored qualified medical professional, because it's possible that you're having a stroke or you had a stroke, and that can seriously damage your memory, and it could be many other things. But assuming that it's not a health issue and that you've listened very, very carefully that I'm not giving any medical advice, here's what I suggest for dealing with this. And I haven't numbered these tips in any particular order of importance. I think all of them are important to experiment with, but understand that a lot depends on the exact circumstances, and there can be a lot of things going on that cause you to lose your train of thought. So the first thing I would suggest is just to pause and point out the issue. Listen, there's absolutely no shame in calling a spade a spade. In fact, there are many situations where you'll garner more respect by simply pausing instead of babbling your way back to the point. Now, I've certainly had it happen that my mind went blank on podcast interviews, and I've simply said something like, "I'm very sorry, but I just lost track of something I wanted to say." It'll probably come back to me in a second. And by being willing to point out the issue and move on, everyone wins. The host doesn't get frustrated, doesn't have to edit anything out, and the listeners can then be amazed when later I go, now I remembered what it was that I wanted to say. And I know as a memory expert to let it go, because chances are that if I remove the pressure, it's going to come back. So it becomes a teaching moment for everybody, and it becomes proof of concept, because most of the time, if you're willing to just let the thought go, it will come back to you. And if it doesn't, well then, so what? It's not going to be a big deal if you're willing to let it not be a big deal. As Bruce Lee said, no self, no enemy. The next thing that you can do is a fun little tactic that works only some of the time, but I find it helpful when I really want to get back to what I was thinking, and that's to run the alphabet. So for example, let's say you're trying to recall a name, but that name just isn't coming. Well, you can overcome this kind of memory block some of the time by starting with the letter A and carrying on through the alphabet to see if the target name comes up. And I'm delighted by just how often this does help. So if you think about any related topic and you drop your train of thought, instead of pressing yourself to find the name or the area of the topic that you're thinking of, just allow yourself to start thinking about the alphabet. And just to take a case study, you're trying to think about Tom Cruise, who's in Top Gun, and instead of thinking about other actors, just take a moment to think about musicians. So you could think about Ariana Grande or something. It's just a completely different category. And then you think of Backstreet Boys for B, and you just go through the alphabet of musicians. This can help you be able to get back to whoever you're looking for. Taking the pressure off the goal is a way of allowing yourself to find what it is that you lost. So this is kind of something that you do in your mind. It can be a little bit tricky, but if you were to read my article on Harry Kahne's multiple mentality, for example, and start to practice some of those exercises, it can help you be able to do two things at the same time. Now, this also can cause its own issues, so this is all the more reason to be able to let it go. So for example, I was on a call with a coaching client, first time I'd met the person, and I was telling her how that I was correcting a memory issue that I had where I had used the actress Emily Watson to help me remember the name of the translator, Emily Wilson, and then when I said goodbye to this person, I said, "Goodbye, Emily," and then I caught myself instantly. I was like, no, wait, sorry, your name's not Emily, but I was doing two things at once, trying to correct my own confusion between the actress Emily Watson, the translator Emily Wilson, and then I wound up saying goodbye to Emily because I was on two tracks at the same time. But I caught myself, and this is where you just let go. Remember, no self, no enemy. And this individual was not in the slightest way annoyed or insulted or anything like that, but I hope she was quite impressed that I not only caught myself, but was able to turn it into a teaching moment even for myself, and did ultimately know what her actual name was. But these things happen, and you got to be able to just let it go, let it go, let it go. I'll say it again because it's so powerful. No self, no enemy. Now the third thing I'll suggest is that if you are in a situation where you do have to just keep speaking, use some sort of structured rambling. So my preference is to call a spade on interviews, as I've described, but sometimes time is limited, and you do need to keep rolling. I had this happen with my TEDx, for example. People laughed when I wasn't expecting them to laugh. In the dress rehearsal, people laughed exactly where I was expecting them to laugh, but when the camera was actually rolling on the real deal presentation, they didn't laugh at that time, and then they laughed when I didn't expect it, and I just had to keep rolling, so I just kept saying stuff until that I found my way back to my memorized script. So you can say something when your thoughts get blocked, and this happens to me on interviews as well. And sometimes I'll just say, now before I tell you about that, let me take a slight detour. And obviously this technique is best used by people who are already experienced in speaking, but at some level, you just need to start getting experienced in speaking, and if you know that you can use this rhetorical strategy, it's going to help you. So one thing that you can do is start to memorize speeches and practice giving them, and just experience what happens when you lose your train of thought and then think, before that I get back to this point, let me share with you a little story, and get practiced at just having alternative stories to give. And if you practice memorizing speeches or jokes or anecdotes, you're going to have lots to draw from. So, spending some time memorizing speeches, stories, long-form poems, quotes, jokes, etc. can help make sure that you're not only a better speaker and conversationalist, but it can give you a lot of those detours that you can then use to help you get back on track when you've lost your thoughts. So you do not have to be taken down by experiencing a mental block while you're speaking or in a conversation. They're going to happen to you anyway, as far as I know. And then this is a structured way that you can take if you experience a mental block while you're speaking and keep moving forward and ideally get yourself back to where you were. But I think we've all had that experience where we're listening to people, they never quite get back to that original point. Yes, that can be sort of frustrating, but it's just part of the world. So, should I say it again? No self, no enemy. And as listeners, we can also be patient to speakers, because there's nothing worse than being annoyed with someone who hasn't gotten to the point, when really, where is the annoyance? The annoyance is in us, not in the speaker. So we can be patient, and we can remember no self, no enemy, and not making an enemy out of anybody else is also another way of thinking about how not to get blocked, because no block is worse than irritation, and it's just simply not necessary when you practice the practice of having a clear mind. And on that note, training your memory regularly is very important. I mean, the previous tips I've just given you are great, but even better is to train your memory so that you reduce the incident of such issues in the first place. So to be clear, they're going to happen to you anyway, but you can reduce the number of incidents by training your memory. So you can learn a language, which is great memory exercise. You can amp that up by using memory techniques. When you learn a language, you can memorize playing cards, you can play memory games, you can commit scripture to memory, you can memorize speeches, as I talked about. You can focus on becoming an expert in a topic area like history, medicine, law, etc. You can practice reading faster, and you can do brain warm-up exercises. And there are a lot of brain warm-ups on this channel. So for best results, pick one thing to practice with your memory and get in at least 4 sessions per week. More is definitely better when it comes to reducing the losing your train of thought amid conversations. And it is very, very powerful to practice your memory. And more really is more. Now, another thing that you can do is just practice being a better conversationalist as such, because sometimes the problem isn't thought blocking. Sometimes we just need to sharpen our communication skills. As Jim Knight suggests in Better Conversations, knowing how to ask better questions is going to be one of the key things that makes us a better conversationalist. So your thought blocking can just flip the switch. Instead of you being the one talking, learn how to be the one listening. And so you get curious, you get open to opinion, you're non-judgmental about what's coming in, and then you get very dexterous with the very simple words that can make everything so much better as you're collecting your own thoughts. What words do I mean? How, why, what, where, when, who. And this is an incredibly powerful skill to have. Just asking very simple questions and then listening deeply. And this point is very, very important because you don't have to feel ashamed when you lose your train of thought. And if you're willing to forgive yourself and others and then just get curious about the people that you're talking to, you'll not only probably find your way back to what you were thinking of, but you'll learn new things that lead to even better thoughts than you could have ever imagined. Now let's talk about some neurobics that can really help your mind. One of my favorites is just simply getting your hands involved, and there's a little practice that is known to improve concentration and focus. It's called Kirtan Kriya. And it is just what I'm doing with my fingers now, but linked to some sounds, and they are classically sa, ta, na, ma. Now, if you don't like sa, ta, na, ma, you can trade it for the Chinese version, which is a, me, to, fo, or you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D. And the idea is just to spend a couple of minutes in focused concentration with this pattern. And this gets related to things like haptic memory and improving your mind through concentration and just focusing on that simple thing. It sounds like, well, that's just too simple to work, but often the simple things are the path to improvement. Now, this is one form of neurobics, but other things that you can do to improve your concentration and your focus is to use your non-dominant hand in eating. So I often use my non-dominant hand with spoons and forks, and it's a little bit challenging, but it increases my focus on the task and gets me more into what's called the task-positive network of the brain because it's a little bit more challenging. You can also practice unlocking your door with your eyes closed. You can practice many, many things related to your hands in just unusual ways. So flossing your teeth with your eyes closed, etc. This becomes something that's unusual. It opens up different parts of your brain. And although it's not directly related to thoughts, it's that ability to focus, be in the moment, and get that task-positive network of the brain operating that helps you have a more focused mental state overall. And this will also help you with mindfulness, which will help you stop labeling yourself as a person who loses their train of thought, because you're going to be someone who is actually active in the practice of stimulating your focus so that you're more present in the moment. And if you do lose your train of thought, you know how to flip the switch and go from being the speaker to the listener with some very, very simple questions. And if you want to turn your hand into a simple memory palace and mix this with Kirtan Kriya, how, what, where, when, why, who, how, where, when, what, why, who, you can just circulate that. And you can even use that perhaps behind your back so people don't think you're weird, and just remind yourself using your hand that I'm going to ask each of those questions at some point in this conversation. And this haptic memory, hand-based memory that turns your hand into a very simple memory palace will be foundational for you. Or you can use what Tyson Yunkaporta shared when he was on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, which is to turn your hand into a memory palace and remember the rules of engagement he talks about in Sand Talk as how some of the Aboriginal people used to conduct their meetings, which is connect, respect, reflect, and direct. And he teaches using your hand in exactly this way for those 4 points of engaging in meetings. It's just absolutely wonderful. Since that I read it in Sand Talk, I've been using it, and in our interview I showed him that I used it, and it's just a wonderful way of reminding yourself how to engage in a conversation, and you never get blocked because it's available to you anytime right on your hand. So you now have strategies to draw upon and practices that can help you avoid having your mind blocked in the first place. And you know, if you need more brain exercises, I would love for you to learn the ultimate brain exercise, which is to learn how to use a memory palace, which gets you tapping into all of the buildings in your life, from churches to cafes to restaurants to homes to the homes of your relatives. And the more you explore them, the more you're going to have memories of stories that you can draw upon whenever your thoughts get blocked, and you can say, before that we get onto that point in deeper detail, let me tell you something about my uncle or whatever. And you just walk through that home, the dinner table, etc., where you had Thanksgiving dinner with your uncle, and you tell the story. And then you get back to the point and you weave it all together in real time because you have been practicing being an amazing conversationalist. My free program is at magneticmemorymethod.com/YT. I would love for you to join that today. And you can use these tools also to memorize endless facts, jokes, etc., that are going to help you be a person who stays on focus and use that hand memory palace in conjunction with space itself. So if you're ready to eliminate thought blocking from your life, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I just want to take a moment to express my thanks to everyone who is a channel member on this channel, everyone who has one of my books or courses, and with that gratitude, until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic, and I wish you many, many hours of unobstructed conversations as you connect with people, respect them, reflect on what they're saying, and then direct your own thoughts back to them without interruption.